I've long been an advocate for director remuneration being at the right level in the right structure, and in the case of not-for-profit boards, remunerating directors in most instances. From a director perspective, I think it's only fair and equitable that you're compensated for your time, your liability, and the contribution of your skills. And from an organisation perspective, you want to attract people of the best calibre with the right skills and experience you need. You also want to be able to hold them to account, which remuneration assists in you being able to do so. And also I think remuneration just helps with getting more diverse boards. Board seats shouldn't be reserved just for those who can afford to hold them. But in recent times I've heard a couple of issues with remuneration, and I thought I'd talk about those. So the first one is a question as to whether remuneration can impede independence. Let me explain that a little bit more. So what I have heard is a concern that in some boards, and particularly where there's professional non-executive directors, there's a concern that there can be a tendency for people not wanting to ask hard questions, to not really want to constructively challenge their peer directors and management for the fear that they're seeing as rocking the boat, and that's going to work against them in terms of their reputation and might hinder them getting another board seat. So what's the antidote to that? Well, I think it's having the right board dynamic where it's seen as a constructive and positive thing for everyone to be able to challenge and question in the right way so that you don't get groupthink and you get the best outcomes from board thinking, board discussion and board decision making. The second area where I've seen some concerns raised about remuneration is in the listed company space. And a non-executive director recently raised with me a concern that they had about some of the requirements where you must buy a certain amount of shares when you're a director on a listed company, and typically it's equivalent to a year or two of your director remuneration fee. And that's all about aligning directors' interests with company interests. But what this director was telling me is when they were in the younger stage of their life and they had dependent children, it was actually financially difficult for them to meet those equity requirements. And of course that would work against age diversity, gender diversity, and also socioeconomic diversity on boards. So what's the solution to that? Well, thinking about some of those equity requirements in the listed company space. What's the amount? What's the time frame over which that equity must be purchased? And thirdly, director tenure. And certainly I've seen this where I think director remuneration means that directors are tempted to stay on the board for longer than what they should because they don't want to lose their remuneration. And of course we want fresh perspectives on in boardrooms. We want to hear from people with skills and experience that are relevant to strategy. We want people who are bringing fresh experience sets into the boardroom, and for that reason we always look at director renewal and board succession planning. Now some boards deal with this by having tenure limits either in the constitution or policy, so that forces there to be some turnover. But I actually think maybe in addition to that you can look at a shorter time frame, and that is at the end of a director's term. And typically directors are appointed for a 3 or 4 year term. So before a director is renewed, making sure their skill and experience set's still relevant, and also that they're still meeting the expectations of their role. They're still adding value, they're still reading papers, attending and bringing the best of their knowledge. And if they're not, then having a discussion about whether they should move off the board. So rather than not remunerate directors, I think thinking about some of these issues in a proactive way is really important so that directors are remunerated fairly and we get the best outcomes for boards and their organisations.